success stories told by the people who live them.
We're going to have some guests on this show that everybody knows, and we're going to have guests on this show that nobody knows yet.
One by one, Nick Hyder is adding hits to the hit streak.
Blessings, folks. Welcome back to another episode of the Hit Streak. I'm your man, Nick Hyder, and in the Hit Lab with me today, I have an extra special treat for you. You know him as Nashville's coach. Folks, in the Hit Lab today, I have none other than two-time world champion head coach of the Vanderbilt Commodore baseball team, Coach Tim Corbin. Coach, thanks so much for hanging with me today, man.
Mm-hmm. Great to be here, Nick. It's certainly good to connect back with a Hyder family. Got to speak to your dad prior to being with you, obviously, and it's always good to be around you guys.
Well, I appreciate that. I don't know how many people could actually say that. You know what I mean? Depends on who you ask, I guess.
I can, for sure.
That's all that matters today.
That's
man.
right.
That's all that matters today. Well, Coach, I'm absolutely ecstatic to have you in the studio with me today. I have a big responsibility because your what you do for our community, what you do for the game of baseball, it has just done so much good for our city, for the kids of our city, and everything else. So I have a great responsibility to make sure that if you've done so many interviews, I want to give them what we haven't talked about before.
Okay,
you know what I mean. So, but I feel like together we can knock it out.
We can do that. No problem there.
So, everybody knows. So you became the coach of Vanderbilt in 2003, right?
Mm-hmm. It was 2003. Got here in I guess it was the summer of 2002. It was right after we went to the College World Series at Clemson, and took an interview, was hired, came right away. Remember, I drove to Nashville from Clemson in a U-Haul myself, so I just moved all my stuff, knowing that I had to get busy quick. And 2002 fall was first fall, 2003 was the first season. It was actually, we talked about it, your last season as a player at Trevecca. So, yeah, a lot of memories going back to that one particular year.
And you mentioned that you were at Clemson prior to that. So, first of all, how many years have you been coaching the game, college baseball?
Going on my 39th year of collegiate coaching. And that's not counting the years I was a student football coach at Ohio Wesleyan. And actually, I was a student football assistant when I was a baseball player at Ohio Wesleyan. So I know we'll probably get there at some point. But coaching was always something in the back of my mind I thought I'd do.
Interesting. So as a player, so you grew up in the Northeast, right? So let's take them all the way. How, like, your love for the game of baseball. Let's talk about that.
I think I had a love for sports in general. I think when you grow up in the Northeast, you become very regionalized because of the weather. So the fall was, in my way of thinking, was always Patriots time, New England Patriots. The winter was going back and forth with the Celtics and the Bruins and hockey. And then in the spring and the summer, of course, was the Red Sox. And I think as an individual, looking back to my youth, I operated that way myself. When the Patriots were playing, it was all football. When the Celtics and Bruins were playing, it was basketball and hockey. We had a pond in the backyard, so I was a hockey player. And then in the spring and summer, of course, played baseball. But I think baseball became something that I felt like I could go to college and try to play. I didn't know that at the time. And the community that I was from, I mean, we're from a very small little town up in New Hampshire, northern New Hampshire, where, I wouldn't say there's a lot of collegiate athletes that have come from my school. But I knew that I wanted to go away from home and do something from a sporting standpoint, so I ended up playing college baseball.
Excellent. Where'd you play at?
Played at Ohio Wesleyan University, which is in Delaware, Ohio. It's a Division III school, and although it's small in nature, there's actually been a lot of college coaches that have come from that tiny little school. A fact for you would be my college baseball coach was a guy named Kevin Colbert. And if anyone knows that name, he was the general manager of the Pittsburgh Steelers for a long period of time. He just retired this year.
Wow.
So he was very close with the Rooney family. He's still a tremendous individual. But his brother, too, Bob, was one of my coaches, too. And I always had a fondness for the Colbert brothers, both Bob and Kevin.
Wow. Wow. And obviously, so playing multiple sports. You have brothers and sisters?
I have one sister. She's younger, and a younger brother too, who's 2 years younger, who actually moved to Nashville when he moved to Nashville a few years ago from New Hampshire, most likely because he wanted to be around our program and see myself. And of course, my dad and mom, who are still living, come down in the spring. They bought a condominium here just so they could watch our baseball games.
Wow. So coming from, I was a smaller college guy myself, and not that like I think the game of baseball is extremely fair, right? Everybody's price is just a little different.
Yep.
And coming from, so I having choices, I chose a smaller school because I would as I played like one of the very first college games I ever saw, I played in it, and there was a lot of value for that. How did you end up at the school you ended up at?
Well, I wanted to go to the University of Maine. Back when I was a kid, University of Maine was a participant in the College World Series, and I really loved Coach Winkin from afar. I wanted to play for him, and that avenue was not open to me. I just wasn't that level of player. So I had a friend that attended Ohio Wesleyan University, and he said, you really ought to take a look at it. And I went to several schools. I went to Indiana State, primarily because Larry Bird came from there, and I wanted to go to school there.
That's right.
And then Denison University, which is a school not too far from Ohio Wesleyan. I looked at that school too. But I ended up going to Ohio Wesleyan because this is just going to sound – it's a good academic school, but Branch Rickey went there. And they have an indoor athletic facility that back then was new age, and I just loved it. I loved the feel of it. It was called the Branch Rickey Center. And, it had a lot to do with my decision-making process because I don't think anything's changed, Nick, since that time. I just enjoy activity. I want to be outside. I want to be inside. I want to be doing something sport-related. And that's why, even in our backyard where we live now, it's like all I ever want is activity back there, too, for our players and for myself. So that kind of it kind of drew me to that particular school. And it was small, and it was good. I felt like that being small, you could develop maybe a little bit more intimate relationships than you could at a big school. I got my master's degree at Ohio State, and looking back at it, I never would have been able to get an undergrad there. I had a marketing class that was 850 kids. So your Social Security was on the wall to see what kind of grade you were going to get. And I just liked the intimacy of where I went to school.
There was a song growing up that my dad used to love that was on the radio, and it was about that love grows best in little houses.
Yep.
And there's something to that, I guess, just because again, the relationships I guess they can form a little bit better or quicker, I should say.
There's no doubt. When the walls are small and the homes are small, there's one thing in having a house, but it's another thing in having a home. And your dad hit it on the head. Having a home means there's intimacy within the home where people can feel one another. And when you feel one another emotionally, there's some strength to that home. And that's the same type of situation that I'm always looking for inside of our organization.
So after playing, your first coaching job was?
I was a high school baseball coach at Kingswood High School. I was actually a JV coach. So I was a JV coach for a year. I enjoyed that. I was a substitute teacher. It was a period in my life where I didn't have a lot of contacts. I know we were talking about this sooner, but the gift I gave to myself, Nick, was I knew what I wanted to do. I wasn't in a flux of, should I do this, should I do that? I knew I just didn't want to take off my uniform. But at the same time, I knew I wanted to be a teacher and a coach. And where, I didn't know. It wasn't like I had this vision of being an SEC coach. I didn't even know what that was. But I knew I wanted to teach and coach. And frankly, if I was at Kingswood High School in New Hampshire the rest of my life, that would have been it. But I was there for a year. Then I went to grad school at Ohio State and was a graduate assistant there for a year. And then I won't go into the story, but I couldn't go back there the second year. The coach got one of his former players to take my place, so I was stuck. And it was a time of my life that was the most difficult because I didn't want to go home. So I basically lied to my parents and told them that I was working again at Ohio State when really I wasn't. But I was essentially a little bit homeless because I had an escort for a car, And I lived out of it for about a month until I drove down to Spartanburg, South Carolina, and knocked on the door of the athletic director, Danny Morrison, who became president of the Carolina Panthers, but he was the athletic director of Wofford College. And on a Sunday morning, I just kind of begged my way on campus, and I said, I will do anything. And he gave me a fundraising internship, and I was also an graduate assistant baseball coach at Wofford College, which was NAI at the time. It wasn't Division I. Well, after one season, Presbyterian College was opening up their baseball position and starting baseball after a 19-year hiatus of not having it.
Wow.
And Danny Morrison, the AD, just said, Tim, I know you can do this. He goes, I've spent 5 months around you. He goes, I'm going to call up there and tell Callie Galt, who is the athletic director at Presbyterian, he goes, that can be your job. And it was. And Callie Galt hired me, and next thing you know, I was a dorm director. That's how I got paid, and was the head baseball coach at Presbyterian College when it was NAI school.
Wow.
Yeah.
So literally, like living out of the car, like you've been at rock bottom, and then now your program is the standard for college baseball. Like that's what a journey.
Well,
what a journey.
I was always mentally healthy, so I always felt like I could get through whatever I was going to get through, but I just knew that at some point I was going to teach and coach again. I didn't know where it was, but I felt like just keep working and banging on doors.
Gotcha. So after Wofford, okay, so how long were you there, and then where'd you go next?
I was at Wofford for a year, Presbyterian for 6, and then I was hired at Clemson as an assistant coach by a guy named Jack Leggett, who was the head coach at Western Carolina and then got hired at Clemson to take over for a guy named Bill Wilhelm, who was at Clemson for 38 years and a tremendous coach. Well, Coach Leggett was a tremendous coach too. He was a Vermont guy, so we had something in common from New England. But the side story to that is I got hired by Jack Leggett at Clemson because of Maggie Blott, who is now Maggie Corbin, who knew Coach Leggett at Western Carolina, and when he was looking for assistant coaches, Maggie and he got in a conversation because Maggie was close with his wife, and he says, yeah, I'm in the midst of trying to hire a assistant coach, and Maggie said to him, well, how about you interview that nut down at Presbyterian College, because I met Maggie when she was at Presbyterian College with her first husband.
Wow.
And then I lost track of her. But anyway, he did. He interviewed me, and I got the job. And then once I got the job that summer, it's about 5 weeks into the job, Jack called me off the road. He goes, Corbs, I know you've been on the road here. He goes, you've been working hard. He goes, I want you to come home for the weekend. I said, I can't do that. He says, you need to. We're going to go to a concert. And I says, who's we? He said, well, Steph, his wife, me. And he goes, you remember Maggie Blott? And I go, yeah, I remember her. He goes, well, she's coming into town with the 2 girls. He goes, I want you to come back. He goes, we're all going to go together. Well, I came home, and there you go. That started it. That was the first date, and we were married 4 years later.
See, it's hearing the backstories like this that really give like people hope, because so many, like there's so many unanswered prayers out there, but there's just so many, like it's so hard to look in the mirror and see sometimes what people have said that about me before is I don't know if I've always had the highest of confidence about. Some people would say it's humble, but if you look up what humble means in the dictionary, it says like it's a low, like you think lowly of yourself in a way, right? So I think humble is a good word, but it can also be it's a tool. And I don't think I was if I had have been as a player with the mindset that I have now, I would have played a lot further. Just because. So like to hear you coming from like all this backstory and your journey to get there and how yours is no different than anybody else's.
Right.
You know what I mean? Literally starting at the bottom and working your way up. That's incredible, man. That gives a lot of people some hope.
Well, I appreciate it. I'm grateful. I'm very grateful. And I don't just say that because it's a word that sounds good and it's applied, but it's very much applied to this situation because I know why I'm in the seat that I'm in, and I know I rent it. I don't own it. So it's like you got to earn it every day.
Wow. And then so you're at Clemson, and you're at this point in time you're aspiring to be a head guy, right? At some point in that time, that's the next stop, maybe.
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, I think, Nick, I went into that as if I was going to be at Clemson. I didn't really have any thoughts about becoming a head coach until some schools, I guess it was in year 7, had gotten a hold of Jack and said, can we interview Tim? And it was, Furman or the College of Charleston or Georgia Southern at the time. And, I took those interviews with Maggie, but I always came back and said, we're very happy with what we're doing, and I'm learning from such a powerful guy that I really admire. I just didn't really want to do anything else. And in year 9, Fresno State called, and it was right before the College World Series, and we went out there, and they offered us the job. And I just remember going back to the hotel that night because I hadn't seen Maggie all day. They took her. I went on those interviews, and I remember coming right through the door, and she's just sitting on the bed waiting for me, and she goes, what do you think? And I said, well, let's go back to Clemson. I said, we're fine. I said, Fresno's nice. They've got a great program, but it's on the other side of the earth. It's almost like when you grow up in New Hampshire and you're in Tennessee or in South Carolina, you feel like you're on, I'm not going to say the right side, but it feels like the right side for us, right, Nick? Well, I just didn't want to go anywhere. And a week later, Vanderbilt opened up, and that was completely different. It was like we got here, and first of all, we loved the feel of Nashville. And I remember interviewing here at Vanderbilt. Maggie just sat in that stadium the whole day. She just said it was a beautiful day. She sat in the stadium, and her feel when we went back to the hotel that night after we went out to dinner with Todd Turner and his wife was completely different. She goes, Tim, if they offer you this job, she goes, this is the fit. This is it. It's academic. It feels right. Nashville feels right. It feels like a city in jeans. And, that's the way it was. And they offered us the position, and we took it right away, and we were very grateful for it then as we are now.
Wow. And that was all the way back in 2002. Yeah. I guess it would have been like the summer of 2002. And you had big shoes to fill because Coach Mubern had been there. He had been there forever. Yeah. Forever. And there was and even though the bar has been raised in your tenure there, it was as far as college baseball went. I mean, Coach Pete had a big thing going on at MTSU, but Vanderbilt was it, man. It was that was the biggest stage in town, So
yeah, Roy was a wonderful man. But what a great, you talk about professional. I mean, he just welcomed me with open arms during that time, and you could tell he was a guy that he really had to grind through it because he didn't have a lot of resources as compared to his brothers inside the conference. So I would say our situation was we gained resources as time went on. We didn't have them right away either, but we were able to accrue them, and Vanderbilt was nice enough to be able to give us those resources. But it was a different time, and Roy is certainly a special individual.
So we talk a lot about sales in the world of business because it generates revenue, and that's why you go into business in the first place, right? So to give people hope to solve a problem, but you got to do it through revenue. You were literally knocking on doors for a coaching job, right? Yep. You had to sell that you're the best qualified person for that job. You're selling players on why they need to be playing with you,
right?
And then you have to sell the players again out on the field into whatever the culture or the concept is of what you guys are chasing that year.
Right.
So, needless to say, you're in sales.
Right.
And you're doing at a very high level for that matter.
Yeah.
And then you talked a lot about. We've talked a lot about mental health. We talked a lot about relationships. You mentioned relationships. A buddy of mine that's done very well for himself. He said, "Man, if you want to focus on because first of all, you're a whatever your habitat is, that's what you are on a regular basis. So if you surround yourself with great people, you will probably whatever it is that you're doing will probably be better." And he also says that he's people that have that are considered successful, they all have successful relationships, a certain quality of relationship. And I know doing what I do, you probably have to have a lot of support from home. I wanted to talk about work-life balance. The whole family has to be bought in when you make a move like you've made over and over again. To start any business, the whole household needs to be bought in. because it takes everybody.
It does. I mean, I think that's why you when you think about your life, and I speak to the kids a lot about this, and you know what I'm talking about here is partnering up with someone who feels like a teammate. You know, it's one thing as a young person to be physically and sometimes mentally attracted to a female, but when you get down to it, the relationship obviously is so much more than that. It's the inner fibers of the individual that you're with, and you ask yourself, can I, if we join in unison here, can I better her life, and can she help me along the same road? And when you team up together, do you make the partnership and do you make the quality of life better for the both of you and the people around you? And we certainly have. I mean, I feel strongly about that. I mean, when I married Maggie, the girls were 9 and 13, and when you come into a home for the first time and start dating, it's really earning the trust of those two little girls that she had, because they're looking at you as if you're the intruder, and they know that their mother allowed you in, so there's okay, we'll just watch this carefully. But I just wanted to make sure that more than anything, you really couldn't have been self-centered on the relationship there, because if you were going to join a relationship there, you had to make sure that you were going to take care of those two girls as well. So as I've said, it's shaped my philosophy on coaching, because when you learn to love someone else's children, you learn to love the kids that you get on a daily and yearly basis. And I've really enjoyed that part of teaching and coaching inside the college environment with Maggie and with Hannah and Molly.
You know, I had the pleasure of playing for some great coaches, and I have relationships to all of them, or with all of them to this day. I'm talking to some of your former players. This is such a, I don't know how to even really ask this question, because like when they talk about you, you're just one of the guys. But when they talk about you, you're not one of the guys. You know what I'm saying? It's a balance of both. You're your friend, your family, but you're also coach. And so like I'm telling my son sometimes it's hard to do. I was like, when we're out on the ball field, I'm in coaching. I have a coach's voice and a dad voice. You know, because it's two different things. And out there, I can't be just dad. I got to be coach too.
Right.
Like, how do you? I don't even know. Like, what school do you go to learn that? Like, how does that even come about? You know what I mean? How do you learn to read people and understand how to do that?
I think if you ask me, it was probably emulating something you saw. You know, it was emulating traits that you saw in other males that you admired and then you appreciated. And, you know, whether it was your own dad or my dad or someone that you saw on TV, your vision of what a teacher and coach looks like was at least stimulated that way for me. And it's like, I want to be that person. I want to be that person that mentors and teaches other young people. And for me, that was very powerful. It felt very fulfilling. It felt right. You know, it wasn't, you know, we've been very lucky that from a financial standpoint, we've done well for ourselves. And I say we, Maggie and I, and really Vanderbilt in general. But it's like the last thing I was ever thinking about. It was like, no, I just want to get involved in a lifestyle that matters, that feels good. And I wanted my boots on the ground. You know, it was like, administration has come my way several times, and nothing against administration, but that's not me. Yeah. I want to be in the middle of it. I want to be digging the ditches. I want to be in the middle of the locker rooms. I want to feel the emotion of pain and happiness and joy, because that's striking, that's fulfilling, that drives you. It makes you young. It keeps you young. And I've just never wanted to do anything else because of those feelings. But that's why I got into it, and that's why I continue to love what we do as a group.
Wow. So, and every year it's you have the way that you guys do it, but you have there's always a freshman class that's coming, which that's important because the freshmen then become sophomores, right? And that's when leaders start to develop. But as those freshmen come in, there's a whole way of doing things. They've probably never done it before, and to that level.
There's probably a rewiring process that takes place, because when you think of males when they're good at what they do, and if they're a college baseball player, they're probably good academically. They've navigated their way through life pretty well socially, and they're certainly skilled from a baseball standpoint. So there's probably a feeling of they're confident, but maybe not a total understanding of why they do what they do and who they do it with matters more than anything. It's just not their individual skill set that is going to drive them. Initially, it may have stimulated why they're in what they're doing, but at the end, once they start understanding that doing what you do and doing it with other people is really the driving force behind teams and doing things well, then it becomes important. The greatest gift, and I told our guys this all the time, the greatest gift a parent can give their child is to get them on a team. When you understand what a team is and how it applies to your life, because really as a parent, you're part of a team, and more than anything, you're serving other people. I mean, Mickey Hyder doesn't go home and say, okay, how can I serve myself tonight? Nick Hyder jumps right into his home, and it's, how can I help here? I'm the ultimate teammate. I'm the ultimate. I have to be a servant. I have to have servant behavior traits to better our home.
That's right.
And I think if you can teach that at a very young age, then kids start to apply that to other facets of their life.
Man, and the greatest, we tell all of our guys, the greatest tool that you have is your team, right? The sharpest tool in your tool belt is your teammates, man. So, all right. So you came into to a program in 2003, and again today it sets the standard for what is college baseball, right? So, and obviously that's not by mistake. That was probably what you had anticipated doing the whole entire time. You just don't know how long it's going to take, and who's needed to do that, right? So you came in with a vision, and you guys immediately got to work. How did you start to fill the roles? How did you know what you were looking for of the roles that you needed to fill? Like, I mean, there's a lot of great players out there every year, and you guys can't recruit every one of them. So how do you pick the ones? How do you make picks to really make sure that your team, your culture, what it is you guys are accomplishing, all fit the narrative?
Try to find the right personality traits that fit what you're looking for. And I think you said vision, and that's really what it was, because I stayed away from goals with the team. You know, obviously that first year we had not been to the SEC tournament in 16 years. So the vision was just try to get to Hoover in that first year, do whatever we can. And we did. But, you know, recruiting was very difficult because we were recruiting against the Stanfords and the Wake Forests and the Notre Dames, the programs that were further along than Vanderbilt at the time. So we got a lot of no's. So it was about being very resilient when it came to recruiting. Don't get your feelings hurt because people are going to say no, and just try to keep striking the fire. Try to keep going after kids that you think, not because you're desperate, but the kids that you think can better your program. And we continue to do that. Eric Bakich was an assistant for me. He came from Clemson with me. He's now the head coach at Clemson. And Derek Johnson, the pitching coach of the Cincinnati Reds right now, was the pitching coach. So we had a good staff, and they were all very they had a great work ethic when it came to recruiting. Eric was the recruiting coordinator, and he never stopped. He just said, we're going to do this. We're going to turn this around. And I would say that Roy Mewborn had some good players here when we got here. And what we started doing is really hitting on Nashville and Tennessee as areas. Because you think of Tennessee's probably one of the most underrated baseball states in the country.
Come on.
And yeah, there's just so many good. You look at all the first round talented kids from Vanderbilt. I mean, you can, when you start with David Price, you start Sonny Gray, Mikey Minor, Jordan Sheffield. It goes on and on and on, and that's the state of Tennessee. So we really wanted to do the best possible job that we could in Tennessee, knowing that the University of Tennessee was going to naturally acquire some players because it's the state university. Vanderbilt, a little bit more difficult because of the academic spectrum of the school. But when we hit upon David Price, it kind of changed things for us in a lot of different ways because he was the one guy that I think in the state and in really as he gained notoriety really allowed us to become more of that Vanderbilt. That's more of a baseball school right now, at least that maybe in younger people's minds.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it 100% is. And I can remember, umpiring was one of my fall jobs when we got back.
Yep.
And I can remember when David was like maybe 16 or something, I was behind the plate and I umpired him, and I told my dad, I'm like, dude, that guy's good. Like, I faced guys in pro ball that weren't that good, and he was 16.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was uniquely special. And then once you get a guy like a blue chip like that, once you've done it once, you can do it again.
Yeah, that you're right. And once it was good enough for David Price, it was good enough for Sonny Gray. If it was good enough for Sonny Gray, it was good enough for Mikey Minor. And Mikey Minor came before David Price, but it kind of became the way of kids in Tennessee. They started to look at Vanderbilt a little bit differently, and that was a good thing. And then as that happened too, the resources around us started to grow. Now, if they didn't grow, Nick, I can't sit here and tell you that I would have been at Vanderbilt forever, because we could have plateaued. We could, if the university didn't jump in, and this is another story, but back then, Vanderbilt changed their philosophy on an athletic department. It was right about the time that you left Treveccan, about 04, 05. It was part of the university, and they took away the athletic department. So we were operating a little bit differently. So people questioned whether or not we really wanted to be part of an SEC conference.
Wow.
And that kind of took a hit on us a little bit, because it challenged our recruiting even more, because kids were saying, wow, I don't know if I should come to Vanderbilt. This school could maybe be an Ivy League school a year from now. But we overcame that, and the university certainly helped us. And then recruiting never becomes easy, but it became a little bit more beneficial for us.
Man. So talk to me about, like, one of my favorite things. I show it to all of our I show it to Ethan's team every year when we coach, and when we first start, and then I show it to a lot of our new businesses, because they focus on the fundamentals of things, learning how the small things are the big things. In the beginning, I show them a picture of you guys standing on the line during the national anthem, and I tell them the story that was told to me about how you guys spend time doing that and making that right. And making it something that has really, in most people's eyes, they would say that's a waste of time. Parents question me when I do it on our little team. Why are we spending time doing that? Right. So talk to me about the impact. So you're great at explaining everything. You explain uniform details and everything. It's so cool getting to see from where I sit through social media little glimpses of that. Right. So talk to me about the little things and why all those things matter so much.
Well, little things do matter, and they're really the focus of everything you do, because what it does is it keeps you present. And I think there's so many small things that you can do as a coach or a teacher, as a parent, that make little things really celebratory. And, you mentioned the national anthem, but the national anthem was something that, we don't have rules, and we have standards, and that goes back to 2003. I said rules are for people who can't follow directions. Standards are for people who aspire to do special things. And so having a standard of standing for the national anthem was more about honoring why you're in the position that you're in. And I talk about the United States of America as it's not perfect, it's imperfect, but at the same time, the qualities of where we live give us the ability to do anything that we want to do if we have a vision for it. And the reason for that are people that have outwardly given their life to protect our state, our country, from other people that aspire to take it down in some ways. So I just think that 2 minutes and 15 seconds of being able to honor it. Now, I know it becomes the event that everyone does before a game, but you can make it more of an event just by how you treat that particular situation. So, yeah, we practice it, and we certainly hold it as a standard. And we've taken it certainly into camps, because I teach how to stand for the national anthem in our camp situation. And whether it sticks or not, it has. certainly sticks with our players, because as they go off and they get into Major League Baseball, I may get during the season, Nick, I probably get 2 pictures, 3 pictures a month on one of our players, and they said, Tim, I just wanted you to see that this is one of your former players in a big league uniform standing for the national anthem. But it's not that I'm not proud of me. I'm just happy that we can still do something that is uniquely small but significant.
That's right.
And significant to a lot of people around that see that go, that's different. And it's not different to bring attention to Vanderbilt. It's just different because it's different that it honors the United States of America in a unique fashion because of being grateful for what you have and do.
It's so good. Like, I talked to my wife, so when we, if we can't go to church in person due to a ball game or whatever else that goes on weekends, we like to do the taking advantage of technology. We can go back and watch a sermon, but when it's done, we always pause the sermon immediately and talk about what the whole family got out of the sermon, because we all, first of all, we all get different messages out of the same message. But more importantly, like we've all been there. At one point in time, we went to church on Sundays because it's what we did on Sundays. It had lost the meaning in the reason the first time that we ever did it. And that's kind of what you're touching on right then and there, being in the moment, remembering it's the same intensity, it's the same meaning every single time you do it. It's not just something you do before a ball game. As a player, I was guilty of it. It was like, oh, let's hurry up. Out there we're mumbling or whispering to the guy behind us and everything else. And it's such a great habit to learn how to do that. Like, it's just like why Marines make their beds first, that we talked about that today in training, how that starts the day off with the victory. And no matter how your day goes, you come back to a made bed, and everything else. So how does that lesson, so first of all, they keep on doing it even into the big leagues, but like, how does that reciprocate into other good habits? Like, what's any good examples stand out?
Well, I think a lot. I mean, we have, I'd say we have probably more structure than most.
You guys count every rep, right? So it's not just you track stats in games. You track if they catch a ground ball, it goes towards their season stats, right?
Right. From an infield, outfield, you're a defensive rep. You're right. So there's a lot of structure. There's a lot of counting. There's a lot of everything matters. And you can say that, but it's really, how do you make it matter? I mean, is it stat keeping? Is it just your feeling for something? Is it your ability just to do something over and over and over? And I think one case would be just our facility in general. It's recruiting ready. And I say it's recruiting ready to the kids because anytime, for instance, the classroom, when we enter the classroom, there's 60 seats. There's intentional seating. The older guys sit on the end, the younger guys sit in the middle because it's protecting the people on your right or left. The staff sits in the back row. Everyone has a notebook. When they come in, they don't open the notebook. When I come in the room and say, good afternoon, then everyone opens the notebook and then they start writing whatever lesson we teach that particular day.
Wow.
But when it's over with, the notebook is shut. It's organized again. The pens are all zipped up. And then the notebook is pushed to the edge of the table, and the chair is pushed all the way in, so the back of the chair is tightly up against the table itself. They look across the tables because the tables are all connected with one another, and they make sure the tables are straight, and the tables are lined on the ceiling tiles up above. So when we leave that room, it's as if no one ever entered that.
That's right.
And it's just leaving something better than what you have. And it's the understanding of renting first before you get to own.
Wow.
And we're not in our locker room. We have a tent. It's right next to our field. The kids have a black T-shirt, a black pair of shorts, a black hat. There's no Vanderbilt on it. And they go in to dress in that tent, and they leave their clothes there, but they align everything up just right. And when they're done, they put their shorts and shirt in a laundry bin, and they don't take a shower. They have to go back to the dorm to take a shower. But I tell them, I said that this isn't punishment at all. It's just the understanding of learning how to treat rental property well first. Because when you go to buy something, then you're going to go to a loan officer.
That's right.
And the loan officers are going to check back with the people that you rented from. Say, how was this guy as a renter? He was the best. He left our property better than when he got in it. And when you start doing that as an individual or as a group, that's when you start transitioning to the home, which is the locker room. And the locker room, once they move in, you know what? It's the greatest celebratory day. You couldn't recreate it if you wanted to. And
That's
Maggie
right.
always goes, make sure I'm there when you move the kids in, because it's always a surprise. But when I do, it is unbelievable the emotion that it brings out. And you imagine if you just moved into that locker room the first day.
Wow.
You got 4 pairs of cleats. You just got your equipment. You'd say, well, what's next?
Yeah.
And you lose all focus of what gratefulness is and how you got something to begin with. And everything you get in life is earned. It's earned. Nothing's ever given. And I just think earning the locker room and earning your equipment is a day-to-day process.
In the world of retail, back when I had jobs that I hated, I noticed when I look back, the greatest chains or the greatest stores that I was in, the bigger ones especially, consistency was so important to the volume of the music, to the type of music that played, controlling the movement and the emotion, and I mean in the air itself. They make fun of me out there because like I walk through and every wheel has to be facing the same direction on those things out there, and they're always like, "Why do you do that? Like, why does that matter?" I'm like, "Because it matters. It looks better, and it looks this. It needs to look as good today as it did on day one."
That's right. It's the first thing I said when I came into this.
That's right.
I said, "Nick, your place is so organized, and in bright, positive. You see something clean, you see something organized, like this space that you have. You feel good when you're in it."
That's right. That's exactly right. And but those little things, like again, it's. The people will come in for an interview dressed to the nines, and then they come into work and they're not dressed to the nines anymore. I'm like, well, why was that more important? Like today's the most important day.
That's right.
You know what I mean? And then tomorrow's just as important as that. Every day matters, and that's how did you come when you first came in 2003? Did they have a tent outside, or how did that evolve? Like at what point in time were you like they need to appreciate this more? I'm doing them an injustice by not giving them the opportunity to appreciate it.
Well, you're right. That's exactly right. Because we didn't have a locker room. We had the visitors' football locker room, and we could only use it when the visiting football team wasn't.
Yeah.
Which meant if there was a football game, Nick, on Saturday,
you guys don't matter today.
No, we didn't matter. We didn't matter on Thursday, Friday either, because they had to get that space ready. So we were always operating without a locker room. The only time we had a locker room was in the spring. So when we finally got the new locker room, I just wanted to make sure that nothing changed. And you say, well, yeah, of course it changed. It changed in years, but it didn't change for me. And because it didn't change for me, I wanted to make sure that if you were a baseball player in 2011 or 2022, you were still feeling the same effects that a young man who was in our program in 2002 and 2003 did. And that's just gratefulness for what you have and the understanding of earning something.
And you guys, your facilities are unbelievable. And you're a pickleball guy, is that right?
And I started playing pickleball over COVID because Maggie played, and
I love pickleball.
Well, yeah, you're probably pretty good at it because you're a good baseball player. But I enjoy it too. Maggie's really good, so she's taught me.
That's somebody told me about that. My wife and I like it a lot, and so it's a lot of fun because tennis is great. But if you're not really good, you spend all day long just going picking up tennis balls.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Pickleball, it's a little easier to manage. You're also a big fan of the UFC. I bet that's new to a lot of folks.
Yeah, I enjoy that a lot. I enjoy the respect level of it. You know, when the fighters fight, you say fight, and sometimes it brings a negative connotation. But when they compete, they compete physically. What I really enjoy about it is the athleticism, how difficult it is to fight for 3 rounds or 5 rounds if it's a championship fight. But the respect for one another when it's finished is always something that I really admire. And got to know Dana White. Lawrence Epstein, who's sits on the Vanderbilt board, is his vice president of the company, and Dana has come in and spoken to our team before. But
that's cool.
Yeah, he was great. He's great. He's just such a realist. How he approaches life, and you think about that time, Nick, when we were during that COVID time when all sports were shut down. That was the only sport that was going. And it was like, Saturday night, that's really when I started. I liked it, but I learned to love it during that time because it was the only thing going on Saturday. It was they did it at the Apex. There was no crowd. It was just the fighters themselves. And Maggie and I would go to our office to kind of make it a night out, and we'd just watch the fights on ESPN. And I just, even back then, that guy built a company and grew a company during at least during our time. I asked Dad about what's the toughest time that he's ever gone through. He said the Depression, then COVID. And, during that time, that's when Dana White really built the company. But, if it's on every Saturday night, I'm locked in. I don't miss at all. I watch it all the time. That's reserved for myself.
That's so cool, man. That is so cool. Well, you mentioned how these guys, the respect level that these fighters have after they're done. My wife calls it a switch that I have, where because we work together, and it's something that we, like every other relationship, we work extremely hard at it on our relationship as husband and wife, and as also as business partners, and we have established roles that each other has, and we try to stay in our lane and support the other one in their roles. But she's always talked about the switch that I have when it's like, I can be having this really intense conversation, and then but when we're done with the conversation, I'm just husband Nick, I'm dad Nick, and she's like, I don't know how you do that, and I was like, well, I could do that because of sports. Right. And there's the most difficult thing I'm training these young kids to do on Ethan's ball team is be great, successful, polite, and well-mannered young men off the field. But on the field, you do the same thing, but there's rules of engagement, right? So it's an established set of rules in which we're going to go out and compete, and then it's eat or be eaten at that point in time when you're out there, especially when a guy's like at the level you guys play, you're playing against the best there is at their age group, right? So, and like, it's so cool, the balance, Coach, how you guys will have the way you take the national anthem, and then when a guy hits the home plate, how he stomps on that home plate. It's two different, you know what I'm saying?
Personalities.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But you got to have both. Everybody that's really successful, they would look back and say that was a great person, has both of those traits.
I think it's like lanes in your mind of, it's not manufacturing how you want to be. It's just, you're very present in that, learning to compete with enjoyment without looking at your opponent and saying you have to hate your opponent in order to beat him. You don't at all. I think it's basically really enjoying what you do at such a level that you don't get overcome with it. If you can jump into competition and be prepared inside of competition and enjoy it fully, then you're going to be able to take the outcome no matter what happens, because you have to understand that if you're preparing yourself in a manner that's going to put you in a good position to succeed, you're not going to succeed all the time. So when you do get knocked off, it's just that, okay, it's what happened on this one particular day, and it doesn't mean that you may have played poorly, you could have, what have you. It's just a matter of understanding competition and enjoying competition. But your mind goes somewhere else when you get inside a competition. It's just kind of the nature of it. And it doesn't mean that person that's inside of competition is truly that person when he goes home at night and is with his son and is with his wife. He's just being very present in that environment right there to enjoy what he's doing right then, as he was 2 hours ago when he was on the ball field.
I saw a clip with Deion Sanders talking to his football team the other day about, they were in the locker room at halftime, and he was talking to them. I guess a couple of the guys were on their phones, and he raised his voice. He basically yelled at him and said, like, guys, like, this game is this long. Like, be in the moment. Like, be in the moment. And if there's nobody on the other end of that phone that's in this moment with you, that phone doesn't exist for these next, for 3 hours. Be in the moment. And then he said, when you're ready to be in the moment, you know where I'll be. And he walked out.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, and my wife says, I'm guilty. That Derek Jeter talked about that, and that little documentary they had about him was phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
But how he had a hard time celebrating the wins today because he was already looking towards the next task or the next goal.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that I'm working on every day, is enjoying that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm like right now, I'm already thinking about what we're going to talk about next and everything else.
Right.
You know? Right.
Well, I think you talk about communication. I know we talked about that before we started talking live, but that right there is that's the best gift you can give your kids, is understanding real human communication and how that develops relationships. We've got a little storage facility right outside the tent, and it will stay that way when we move in the locker room. And it's called the Non-Human Communication Storage Facility. And all it is a place where before you go into the locker room, you put your phone. And your phone isn't picked up again until 3 or 4 or 5 hours later. So that when you go into that tent, you're fully present and locked in to the guys. We, on Saturday, this past Saturday, we got done with our training. We started at 7 in the morning. It was a pretty intense training environment, and I completely surprised the guys. I gave them a packing list. It was very short. I said, you got 1 hour to come back here to the facility, and I said, we're jumping on a bus. Well, long story short, we jumped on the bus, and as we jumped on the bus, they had all their gear. They had no idea where they were going. I said, you got 15 minutes to use your phone and tell the people around you that you're not going to have the phone for the next 48 hours. Well, we went to the mountains, and we stayed in cabins, paintball, got in the lake, played volleyball, played basketball, played pickleball, played everything. Woke up the next morning, and then we whitewater rafted all day. I told the kids on the bus yesterday when we got back, I got emotional saying it, because I said, I laid in that cabin and could not get to sleep until 4 a.m. And the reason I couldn't get to sleep was because they were laughing so hard and playing games in their own cabin. And they couldn't do that.
Grown men.
If they had a phone.
Yeah. Grown adult men.
Yeah. And it's like, that matters. You know, that that interpersonal communication of just being present with other people. I just saw it in my dad, 2 weeks ago when I went home, and, I was with him in a hospital for 12 days from 8 to 8. But, me being there, my brother being there, my sister being there, my mother being there, I know it helped keep him alive. And I know it's keeping him alive right now. But I also saw 3 people being wheeled out of that hospital with no one by their side and no longer living.
Yeah.
And, loneliness is, unfortunately, it takes hours away from our life. But the ability to enjoy moments with people and look at someone while you're talking to them, I mean, that adds time and years and emotion. And when you start developing emotions for people, that's when the relationship starts to grow, and that's where trust occurs. And that's why if we can take phones away from our kids, and I'm not saying anyone has to do that, but I can tell you right now, our kids, they'd raise their hand every second and say, take my phone. I don't need it. Because when I'm with my boys, I want to be with my boys. I don't want to be distracted.
That's right. In the moment. And, the Coach Forehand, my coach in college, was always really great he did team building stuff that, like, just looking back, it made us truly teammates. And a true teammate is a teammate for life. There's guys I hadn't spoken to in 20 years, but when I see them, nothing's changed.
Yeah.
And those teammate relationships are incredible. You mentioned a lot about communication. We talk a lot about communication here. And we define words a lot. So, like, I guess it was in 2019 or 2020, we were talking about, I think it was like the word mindset. And I'm looking out across, there was like 50, 60 people listening to me talk about this. And I looked out, and I just, like, it was like, I had this moment this aha moment where I was like, I don't think we're all talking about the same thing. So I asked them, I was like, I picked random 5 people. What does mindset mean to you? And I got 5 different definitions. So we were actually talking about 60 different things at the same time, right? So we define things a lot. And then there's not one problem in the history of mankind where you look back and they say they communicated too good. That's why that problem happened.
Right.
It's always a break in communication somewhere.
Yep.
All right. So, man, because there's so much that that I could go in. We talked about the little things. All right. One of the coolest things every year is when you roll out a new uniform, and the campus does a great job of giving fans a look into that, a look into that process. So first of all, guys, not only is he's running a recruiting program. There's academic stuff that he's got to do with the boys. He's got to strategy, coaching on the field. But then, like, somebody had to set all that up for the bus, for the cabins, for the gear, for the activity. I'm amazed at how much, and you still take time to call guys like me back. You give to your community. I don't have one person. Now everybody's going to blow you up, but I don't know if everybody's ever said he's told me he couldn't do it. Whether it was speaking at the Old Timers Baseball Association banquet, you're there every year. You totally invest in the community, which you alluded to at the beginning. You wanted to recruit local when you first started. We do that. We believe the same thing about our insurance agencies. Is we cover half the country. Right. What we start here. Like, why would we drive past 100,000 people to call somebody in Vegas? So you're investing in the community. But like, how do you everything has to have that meaning. So when you roll out the uniforms, walk me through that process, because it's so cool, man. It like gives me goosebumps every year. I'm fired up.
Well, we have pretty standard uniforms and haven't really differed in years. I mean, the Vanderbilt script is always across, the black, the gold, the white.
Well, the pinstripes made a huge statement when they came out.
Yeah.
The black unis.
And my dad wasn't a big fan, but the driving force behind them was Negro League Baseball, because when I saw their uniforms, I just thought to myself, those are different. Those are different, and I felt like it was a fun uniform that I might not pick out for myself, but I felt like the kids would really enjoy it. And the minute we developed that all black pinstripe uniform, it took. And it almost became a Friday night uniform, to the point where we do, I would say 90% of the time, wear that on a Friday night. And then we've been fortunate to have so many good Friday night pitchers, whether it was Price or whether it was Jeremy Sowers back in 2003 or whether it was Sonny or Mikey or Kyle Wright now, Walker Buehler. We've just been fortunate in that uniform. When you think about like Carson Fulmer, when I think of Carson Fulmer, that my image goes to him wearing that uniform. So that was one of the first. And then I think it was 2009 is when I had this thought that we should create a USA uniform. And it wasn't to move away from the Vanderbilt colors, but yet it was like, you know what? We're in a country where we're celebrating our university by what we wear, but we have an opportunity, at least one game, maybe during the course of the week, to celebrate our country, because it's country before state and state before university. And so we started wearing the USA uniforms, and they were red, white, and blue, and it was an attractive uniform. But then I got the idea that, you know what, we can take this USA uniform a step further and really celebrate our country. We can celebrate the university, we can celebrate Nashville, and we can celebrate people. And so that's what we did. We went to an all green, the Army green uniform, which celebrates the country. We kept the black and gold script, which celebrates the university. We've got red, white, and blue, which, again, celebrates the country. We've got a Nash emblem and logo, which celebrates Nashville. And then what we do on the shoes is we have the state name of where that kid is from on the shoes.
Wow.
And it's just a way of celebrating all these entities that you represent, but I think more than anything, Nick, protect. And I like... When we think of what we do, it's just protecting what we do by how we honor it and wear it. And I just always, when we rolled that uniform out, I took the time to explain it, and I always do to the kids, because I really want them to understand the meaning behind it. It's just not fabric with a whole bunch of funky colors just for the sake of it. There's some meaning behind it. And I think anything we do inside that classroom or anything we do as a program, I define it first, because I want the kids to have an image of why we do what we do, and it's not just done because. It's done for a reason.
So anytime a Troy McQuaig is a huge has been a great influence on me, and he said he defined culture to me one time as it's just the way we do things here.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was, and he also told me that leaders are nothing if not servants, right? And I think he also told me that leaders were a leader was first a great follower. So many things. So and I know that I've heard you speak about trust over and over again, trusting your teammates, trusting each other, and trust is earned. Right, through a relationship. So how do you, one of the hardest things that I had to learn was I wanted to be around people that were a part of my past and not necessarily my future. And the moment that I started auditing who I spent my time with, just like if my son's getting in trouble and there's a kid that gets in trouble, I say you shouldn't hang out with him. I didn't do that as an adult for a long, long time. And the moment I started to do that, everything about the success that I was chasing started to happen, right? So how I'm sure if you could, you'd have every kid in America be a Vandy boy, right? But they can't be. They can't be, and they need to be. When we recruit for agency owners or business owners, whatever it may be, we're trying to find somebody that isn't a best fit for us, but we're a best fit for them. Right. So how hard is that from a recruiting standpoint and keeping the quality level that you guys have in and year out?
Well, we just try to do the best job we can. I mean, it's not always going to work out for individuals. Hopefully, the large amount of them it does. And I say work out. I mean, I think that's all. It's really what your perspective is on something, because there are some kids that have left Vanderbilt that, 10 years later, I have quite a relationship with them. I either rehire them or put them back in our program somehow or do something with them. But I think uniquely, you're always looking for a skill level that applies to what you're looking for in a baseball player. And we're looking for a baseball player. And you say baseball player, okay, what does that mean? It just means someone who's willing to do anything on the field that might not just be pigeonholed in one particular spot. They're going to do what they can do, and if you can find well-rounded individuals that way, that helps. But I think the roundedness goes more towards the personality. It's the personality traits. If you look at kids and their personality traits, that matters most, because I would say that even though Vanderbilt, we've been consistent, we're also looking for a certain kid, and I think some kids might not always look at Vanderbilt and say, that's for me either, because they may think it's, there's a lot of discipline there's a lot of structure, but yes and no. But, is when it gets right down to it, there is a lot of structure. We're very organized, but discipline, it's one of those things where kids don't ask for it, but boy, don't they crave it.
That's right.
And when they crave it and they've got it, it just gives them, and I know Jocko has said this, Willink has said it, but it gives them freedom, and it does. I mean, you think, even us as older people, we want discipline in our life because it keeps us between the lines, and when we're between the white lines, we're so much more productive with our relationships. We're so much more productive in what we're doing.
Yes.
And at a young age, to understand that and learn that and say, yes, I want to get the most out of my college career. I want a professional career. Well, all those things are in front of you, but you can't have those things without discipline. You can't have those things without making the right choices and decisions in your life and building strong routines that are going to create foundational actions for yourself. And without that, they're just not going to get to those spots. So when you think about our little situation here, those are the things that we're teaching right now inside of that classroom, because those are the things that move people. Those are the things that move people towards more consistent outcomes. I'm not going to always say successful, because success, that comes and goes. But consistency, we're all looking for that. We're all looking for consistency, and we're all looking for, when this time in our life, Vanderbilt University leaves us, when they get off on their own, are they going to be able to transition with peace, with mental peace and confidence and thankfulness? And I think when I look at our kids, and we go to these weddings, we've got 4 this fall, Maggie and I, and that's what you're looking at. You're just looking for peace of mind, and just like whoa, boy, he's done well. He's done really well for himself, and he's shaped himself well inside of life.
Well, everybody wants form, especially economically, they want a form of stability, right? And I'm telling my guys all the time, I would have a hard time working for other people. I like to be in charge. I like the responsibility. I like to be in control. Because the reason is because I feel like I'll just outwork or outperform you, right? So I don't ever want to be stuck behind somebody else that's gonna hold me back in any way. What I tell the folks that are craving stability, well, like economically, how stable you are is a reflection of the choices you've made up to this point, and those choices are usually not stable. They're very inconsistent. There's no good habits. Again, going back to the 3 key ingredients to all success, I think it's mindset, skill set, and then habits, and in that order. But talk to me about, this is a big topic with baseball players, because I went through it too. At 27 years old, I'd played my last game. And all my friends were 4 or 5 years in the workforce, if not longer. They'd already moved out of the mailroom and into something else. And like, I was just an out-of-work baseball player at the end of the day at that moment. And it took me, I was probably like 32 or 33 years old when I actually figured out, started the journey that's led me to who I am today. And this is obviously not the finished product either.
Right.
How do you guys, like, I interview a lot of kids from the other colleges and other sports and everything else. There's less of them coming from your program than other schools and other sports. Why is that? Like, they're prepared in a different way, obviously. You're doing something extremely right.
Well, it's trying to create a vision for them outside of baseball. And I think when the discussions that I have with the kids inside of my office, and there's probably 3 intentional, outside of just being able to go back and forth when they come in my office and just talk, it's those times where I sit down and really ask them very directive questions about where they see themselves now, and remove baseball from your life. Where do you see yourself 5, 6, 7, 8 years from now? And what are you doing right now in order to make that happen? Because the greatest piece those guys can give themselves, if in fact they give themselves the opportunity to play professional baseball, great.
Right.
But you want them to go into professional baseball with no fear of not having professional baseball. And I think transitioning is, I look at a lot of NFL football players, and you know, I don't know, because I'm not in the middle of the NFL, but I don't know what the structure is for a guy that's transitioning out of the NFL. It has to be very difficult.
Yes.
It's almost like, I think sometimes like you've been fighting in the military for a long period of time, and then all of a sudden you're not. You're just a normal civilian now, and now you're transitioning in what was a very difficult and emotional time of your life into normal life. That doesn't happen without help. That doesn't happen without a plan. That doesn't happen without people around you that can help you get from point A to point B. I've always felt like, Nick, if I can provide that source for them at the age of 18, 19, and 20, then they've already created a foundation of thought for themselves beyond baseball, so that when that time happens, they're not saying, okay, what do I do now? I'm stuck. That's not what this experience at Vanderbilt was meant to do. It was meant for them to get into that environment, say, okay, next. What's next?
That's right.
And go into that confidently. Might not always work out, but at least say, I'm equipped for this. We saw this coming. This isn't something that surprised me. We knew it was coming. My baseball career, whether it's David Price, Sonny Gray, or Tim Corbin, or Nick Hyder, our baseball careers were going to come to an end at some point in time.
That's right.
And usually someone else was going to decide that for us. We weren't.
That's right.
And so when that time came, were we going to crumble? Or were we going to say, no, I was ready for this. I knew when it was going to come, and I prepared for this. I had a plan A. Because plan B, it was your plan A, but it's got to be your plan B. Because if it's your plan B, it's almost like it's a carrot. It's the ice cream on top. You wanted it, but you didn't know it was going to happen. Now enjoy it, because you know your plan A is already in your back pocket.
That's right.
And I think to not
like
just
that.
because it's Vanderbilt, but you got a lottery ticket in your back pocket. When you've got a degree and you can move forward, you're really building your own personal life insurance policy by equipping yourself to do what you need to do when you transition from baseball.
Man, and that's my wife had a funny thing happen to her the other day. She was just having a little fun, and she said, "There's another day I didn't use algebra in my life." And of course, people chimed in like, "No, you did when you checked into the when you checked your bread and how much bread you needed to replace at the house." And they named 10 real time situations when you use it. And I looked at her and I'm like, but see, that's the issue right there. That is like everybody has the knowledge, but they're not taught how to use it always. Right. They're not taught how to apply what the skills that they actually possess. Right. And make that something that can better themselves and better others around them at the same time.
That's right.
Some people have thought that I had a problem with school. I was like, no, when I left school, like I was equipped, but I sure didn't know how to use the equipment. Right. I guess is the best way to put it. Nobody really said, they said, here's how I can teach you marketing, but here's how you actually can apply it and be a benefit to a company. Right. Right. For me, it was just experience, and then I look back, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember when Dr. So-and-so told me that, or whatever it may be.
Right. Well, I think you're right, and I think that it's also being there for those kids when they're in that moment. You know, they're 25, 26, or 27. I got a couple phone calls when I leave here with 2 former baseball players who just got released, and the conversations are going to be not so much what's next, but how do we do it? You know, putting a plan together. And I think helping, that's really how, when you get down to it, the ball and the bat and the glove, great. But the value of being able to teach and mentor goes well beyond their time here.
That's right.
And, you know, it's why we built an alumni locker room, is so these kids could come back and so you could continue to help them. And yeah, I've always felt like when you decide to go to a school, it's a lifetime decision. It really is, because those people will stay in your life as long as you want them in your life.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Well, again, once a teammate, always a teammate, right. Man. You know what I mean? So, all right, as we kind of bring this sucker to a close here, most people, if they budget anything, they at least budget their money. Not a lot of people budget their time. Mm-hmm. And I look at my time here versus the money. I look at money's man-made, just like a man made the grades in school, right? So as a man of faith, I have 2 different ways in which I'm trying to improve, spiritually and then professionally, right? And there's a lot of blend in there. But I look at, what it takes to get into heaven has nothing to do with what's required to be rich here on earth, right? It's 2 different sets of things. So I just look at money as like, that's just man's report card on how you're living man's life here on earth. And when I step in front of the pearly gates, there's no doubt in my mind where I'll be going. But it's also something that you don't take for granted and that you got to work at every single day. So most people don't budget their time. Most people are terrible stewards of their time. I actually, unless I'm at a stadium watching a game, I don't really keep up with sports anymore, because I feel like I could be doing something more productive with my family, with my kids, for myself, or for my business, right? So when most of my friends are hanging out watching ball games, I'm not doing that. Although we do love our fans, and I got to do. A buddy of mine sat in that chair last week, huge Vanderbilt fan, and this is a cool story about your wife. So they were tailgating a baseball game. This is years ago. And they didn't know who she was, and she asked him, "Are you guys tailgating a baseball game?" And I guess that was the first time she'd ever seen it. And I think he told the story on air, but literally, like, she walked out with swag, with gear for the first ones, and they tell everybody about that, about how cool that was, about what type of that's just the Nashville way, in my opinion, like the hospitality, right? And I had to tell that story. It was Josh Minton is who it was.
Okay.
And he's at every game. Yeah. He traveled with the football team to Hawaii this year.
Oh, nice.
when they went. Yeah. So diehard, and that guy's extremely successful, and he does a lot of great business relationships from the crowd, from the stands in those places. So I'm not knocking anybody that goes to ball games and such. That's just not what I do, right? How do you take the time to do stuff like this, to meet with alumni, players that are no longer there, to meet with current players when they need stuff, to meet with the teachers when the players mess up, to meet with your staff, to hire new staff, because the best, you always have the best, and they're going to end up, if they're not with you forever, they go do their own thing somewhere, right? There's that just like you did when
Right.
prior to Vanderbilt. So, and then you got the home life, and I think there's one of the most amazing things somebody can be is a step parent, because there was a song that Brad Paisley had out about being half the dad he didn't have to be, or I think it was half the man, half the dad he didn't have to be, or something like that. It's an incredibly selfless thing, and like you said, and it's there's no easy way about it, because you're the intruder coming in,
Right.
You know what I mean? So how do you go about like managing your time, even going back and forth with your assistant and stuff? Like, everything is, your communication level is just on a different level than everybody else's. I'll just be honest with you.
Well, I mean, I appreciate the compliment. Well, first of all, I treat it as a lifestyle. It's never been a job for me. And in fact, when I talk to our kids about, that's one of the reasons you go to college, is to create a lifestyle. Because if you create a lifestyle, you're actually hitting more towards a passion. And if you're ever able to have a lifestyle and you're passionate about what you do, you almost feel like you'll never work a day, and you're getting compensated for it. So I think for me, it's always been, we have a lifestyle, number one, and we're always available. We live a half a mile from the office. I drive a Polaris four-wheeler. I don't drive a car. Maggie drives a truck. So we're always available for the players. And Maggie's there every day. I mean, once classroom starts, she sits in the back row and takes notes. And I always asked her, I said, you sleep with a guy who's talking. You already know what he's going to say. She goes, it's different when I'm in that classroom. I feel like I'm one of the students. And then when we're done and go out to the field, she's at every practice. She doesn't miss a practice, and she doesn't miss a game. So first of all, she probably has taken on the step parenting role in a different way, in the fact that, no, I want to be a step parent too.
100%.
And she and I, we do this as a team, because she got her master's degree a long time ago. And when the girls left, there was a time in her life, Nick, where she wanted to do something. I said, you know what? You do whatever you want, and I'm fully going to support you. I said, but I'm going to tell you something. If you want to do this with me, if we can do it together, it's going to be more fulfilling for both of us.
That's right.
And it has been. It's just like,
I agree. I'm right there with you, man.
yeah. You work with your wife.
Absolutely. She was here earlier and was going to do stuff for the kids' classroom at school, which is great. Being self-employed, we can make those decisions. We don't have to ask somebody's permission. However, that was a decision we made a long time ago, is like, I don't clock out from being a husband and a father. I'm not clocking out from my business or my staff or anything else. It's what you do, what's required. But man, like, we get to spend so much time together building something that helps others, and it's also helps us. And I absolutely love it, man. I could not do it without her, 100%.
So I do think, and you've done it, you're an example of it. I do think that you can blend your family into whatever you're doing, and it can be done with tact. It can be done professionally. The girls have always been part of our program. We just feel like it's just part of our life. And you mentioned the assistants. Our assistants are, I mean, they're just next level. I mean, the reason I get to do a lot of the things, whether it's this or whether I get to prepare for a classroom, which takes a lot of time, is because you've got other assistants that are going to pick up in other areas. I mean, something has to give, right? We can't do everything.
That's right.
So if you have assistants, and I'm not talking just about Brownie and Bax and Tyler Shoemaker, I'm talking about everyone else who assists in that area. They're number one, they're really good at what they do. But number two, and I will say this, that they're intentionally picked because they fit organization, but they also have a teammate that allows them to be independent and work with other people's children. And that's a talent. You know, there's just I would say everyone, I think most coaches' wives will say, well, you know, I knew what I was getting into. You don't know what you're getting into, because you're going to spend 70%, a coach is going to spend 70% of his time with someone else's children. He's going to spend 30% of his time with his own.
That's right.
And that's part of what you do.
Yep.
And it doesn't have to be a bad thing. It can be a great thing, because you think about children watching their own parents work and invest in someone else's kids is very powerful.
That's right.
And I've always felt like they have the ability to bring their kids and wives into our situation as much as they want to, and I want them to. But understanding, too, that their wives and children have a lot of activities and always can't be there. So we're very fortunate that our coaches and our staff members have very powerful teammates too, and they're just as good as their husbands or wives who are working with us.
You know, the businesses that launch the fastest have that in common, and they have support at home.
Yeah.
They have support at home 100%. Yeah. All right, last thing, because I know we got to get you back. So from the outside looking in, you guys are an unbelievably perfect blend of innovation versus tradition, right? When I say innovation, when they're going to, which I do got to ask you, how do you like when I played, you gave signs like this, right?
Yep.
So
finger signs.
That's right. So now it's different, but you guys were the first in college baseball to embrace that, if I'm not mistaken.
Do
you like it?
I like it. It's I think, for your dad and me, it's a little bit unconventional because we're probably very pure. Even having turf is a little bit odd for me, but yet I understood this part of the country was probably beneficial for us because it allowed us to train and play even when the weather wasn't just right. But to your point about the wristband, it was a way to get the game moving faster. And I've looked at a lot of those new major league rules that are going to be applied to next year's game, and I do like them. And I like them because I think, as I tell the team, when you get in the batter's box, get in the batter's box relatively quick. When you're a pitcher, get on the rubber and get on there quick, because really what it is, it's creating rhythm and flow to the game.
That's right.
When you create rhythm and flow to the game, it moves. And when it moves on your behalf, it feels better. But also, we're a business too. And we're a business because the consumer has to want to come and watch us.
That's right.
If the consumer doesn't like the product, they're not going to eat at your restaurant. And you've got to give them something to view and something to say, I love watching those guys play, because they play fast, they play aggressively, they look like they're having fun, and they celebrate one another. And that feels good. And when you see that, you want to be a part of it, and then you start saying, hey, you need to come watch these guys play, and then they start pulling people with them. And that's when the force, the positive life force inside of a stadium gets stronger. And I call it the boomerang effect. When you create that force on the field, it gets sent up into the stands, and then it gets sent back to you exponentially greater than the way you sent it back.
That's right.
And I think that's when you start having environments that really matter and are fun.
And then understanding how to take that innovation and put it into a tradition at the end of the day, where mentioned Troy McQuaig earlier. He taught me that like every decision of this $1 billion company that he ran was based on 5 guiding principles. If it didn't meet all 5 guiding principles, we didn't do it. Right. So and ever since then, I've had the pleasure of getting to know or interview some amazing people, and they all said the exact same thing, that there was even our country was founded on a certain set of guiding principles, right? And that's what makes it an establishment in a country. So how do you keep the balance with innovation and working it into a rich and winning tradition? Because it means something to be a Vandy boy. Like, it's a pretty cool club to be in, I would imagine, and everybody that is one is dang proud of it.
Well, I think I went back to that word of protecting it, and I think on our notebook, the front of the notebook has all the past 20 years a small picture of every team, and on the back of the notebook has the names of every player who finished their eligibility at Vanderbilt during my time, during our time.
Oh, wow.
And so what we're doing is we're essentially, our team this year is just one chapter of 21 years of Vanderbilt baseball history. And that's why I think, I know we talked about culture lightly, but I don't talk about culture a lot. I talk about culture and what it is to the kids, so they start understanding and start getting a vision for it. But I think culture is over time. I think it's environment, which is very present. And when I look at my role with these kids, it's just being a facilitator. It's creating an environment in which all of them can grow, including the staff, because as you mentioned, some staff members will move on, and really that's what you're trying to do, is you're trying to equip people and better their skills by them being involved inside of your environment. So it's just creating the best environment that you possibly can. During that time that you're creating that environment, the best feeling in the world, and you'll say this about your son too, is when initially you start driving the car, and then there comes a time where you put your son in the driver's seat and you're next to him, and you're still helping him drive, but you're saying, okay, up here 100 yards, you're going to turn to your right. Make sure you put on your blinker. Make sure you're far enough behind the car in front of you, and so on. But then there's going to be a time where your son looks at you and goes, Dad, give me the keys, and you and Mom get in the back seat. And when that happens, you've created foundations for your child to where they can start driving the car. And when they start driving the car, you've equipped him for the trip. And when you do that as a coach and your players go, Coach, we got this. It's like the best compliment you can get.
That's exactly right.
Because what you've done is the teaching and coaching, they've taken it. You've walked alongside of them. And I think, whatever your perception is of a leader, whatever your perspective is of a leader, really as a leader, you're walking next to them. You're just walking next to them. And sometimes I just remember my dad, when he taught me how to ski, he was 6 years old. I was 6 years old. And he got off the chairlift, and it was the first diamond that I ever skied. And the diamonds are tough. And he skied down about 50 yards, and I didn't go. And he stopped. He looked back. He goes, you got a choice. He goes, you can either ski in my tracks all the way down, or you can stay up here, and in 25 minutes, I'll get back on the chair, and I'll see you back up there. It's your choice. And he started to move. And what I did is I just skied in his tracks all the way down the mountain. 15 minutes later, we're both at the bottom of the mountain. But that's life. It's just walking behind someone else and following their footsteps. And before you know it, it's 50 years later, and you think, what were the reasons I do what I do? Well, you follow the footsteps, and you follow the footsteps of people that really matter to you. And whether it's Mickey Hyder or Jack Corbin, it's like the people in our life that we celebrate, we took some of their personality with us as we started to move on and develop our own.
That's right. Man. That's I probably couldn't think of a better way to bring it to a close, even though we could have gone, on and on and on about all kinds of stuff. So, just for all the fans out there, everybody's excited for the upcoming season, baby.
Thank you. We are too. We got some older kids, and we got a very positive group of people, which I'm excited about.
And there's nothing like SEC baseball.
It's tough.
Man.
Yeah, it's tough.
Oh, gosh.
It's a meat grinder.
Yes, I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, folks, to keep up with Coach Corbin online, obviously they're the university does a great job. That's at Vandy Boys on Instagram. That's where I get all my best stuff.
Thank you.
And then I believe it's at Corbin TC for the personal one. But when it comes to Vanderbilt baseball and everything they got going on, the Vandy Boys Instagram is absolute, as the kids say, it's fire.
Yeah, well, that's the one to follow right there.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. Well, Coach, is there anything else that you'd want to leave? Again, I have one more question.
Yep.
One more question. So, as a kid, I got Opie a lot. I got Opie a lot as a kid with the red hair and everything. Yep. When you were younger, when you first came to Vanderbilt, and I saw your photo, you looked a lot like Ron Howard with hair. Have you ever got Ron Howard before?
I can't believe you said that. It's almost like you knew one of my prior stories. When I was at Presbyterian College, I was 24 years old. I was the head coach. I had the first meeting, and I got done with the first meeting. It was in a classroom, and they took a storage closet and made it my office, but none of those kids knew where it was. So I went in there, and I just shut the door. Well, I heard all the kids mingling, and this kid named Mel Thompson, he was from lower part of Georgia. Some kid asked him, he said, what did you think of that first meeting with Coach Corbin? He said, I don't know what to think. He said, I'm looking at that guy and I'm listening to him speak. And he said, he talks like John F. Kennedy, but he looks like Opie Taylor. He said, I don't know if I can trust that. So that was that. That was, but that, yeah, I probably at certain times look like Ron Howard, I would imagine.
You did, well, especially even this is, I think it's an older picture here a couple years ago. And it's, I mean, there's a lot of, especially with a hat on, you wouldn't know, man.
Yeah.
And I got Opie as a redheaded kid my whole childhood.
That's not bad, though. That's a compliment from me.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Well, Coach, thanks again so much for hanging with me, man. It was an absolute honor and a pleasure.
Thank you.
This means the world to me, and you will be somebody that, especially when we get the new spot built out, I'd like to have you back.
Love to.
Dive into some more stuff, especially when it comes to leadership, because the world needs more good leaders.
Yep, you're right. And just right, very positive people more than anything else. You're 100% right about that.
That's right. And there's two sides of news. There's good news too, and we need more of that.
That's right.
We need more of that. So, well, folks, thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of the Hit Streak. I am your man, Nick Hyder. Once again, thanks to Coach Tim Corbin of the Vanderbilt Commodore baseball team, 2-time national champion, right? But that's temporary.
Yep.
Thanks again for tuning in. We'll see you soon. God bless.